spring, everyone. It is officially spring. And now for the next several weeks, we're going to see very close amounts of dark hours and daylight hours. And then it's going to specifically start switching back the other direction as we move into the summertime and hit the summertime change. There's usually 4 of these a year. They have different names. I always forget. I think the summer one's called vernal. And so there's these different like seasonal periods of daylight that shifts. One of the things that I've learned a little bit about is the concept of rebirth of Earth, the concept of life after death. You know, some of those things actually came during the beginning of the spring equinox, and understanding that one of the first things you can do, and I've constantly been telling you guys to make sure that you're doing plenty of watering right now. We're trying to get our seeds to germinate. So if you apply that even to your internal self and the things that you're working on at home with yourself, these are times of the year when you wash away the troubles of yesterday and plant anew the seeds of tomorrow, and then bask in the glow of the early spring sun that is a very light sun but increases very quickly as we enter the summertime. What happens is that the sun actually gets to the point of the equator line, and at that point we start reaching closer to our summertime, and so that's what occurs. And so those are some things to think about, because like last week I talked about the zoom in, zoom out. There really isn't anything that occurs in the garden that doesn't apply directly to life. And some of the kind of old pagan conversations about the earth are really transitioned into some of the things, the spiritual and religious things we picked up in different types of spiritual religion. The challenge, or spirituality, the challenge is that a lot of times there was a trying to disconnect in order to keep away from some of the old like pagan rituals of worshiping things that weren't necessarily something we should be idolizing. But then we went back the other direction, and now we worship things that we shouldn't necessarily be idolizing as well, in terms of material things and stuff like that. So this is a really important time of year for me. It is a new year. It is a new season. It is a rebirthing season. This is a big part of what's happening. It's so exciting to be able to pull out some of those spring vegetables that you actually see in a lot of the spring dishes, on some of the Easter bunny rabbits eating carrots, the beautiful eggs that we're getting out of our chicken coops. We're going to start to see more and more eggs coming out. All of that kind of stuff is occurring. But then in addition to that, we're seeing a lot more harvesting. And so about this time of day, I'm actually done harvesting. And the reason is as I pick this up, you can start to see your lettuce starts to get really soft. And so you want to keep it warm. So what I've been doing is going in and harvesting a lot of, this is actually iceberg lettuce, the loose leaves of the iceberg lettuce. There's actually some romaine lettuce in here, and some other types of hardier greens that are soft and baby. Of course, I throw in a little bit of baby spinach, and then I start creating another catch system over here that is some mustard greens, and then some spinach, lots and lots of spinach, tons of spinach to harvest. I'm also harvesting dill and cilantro, and I'm trying to harvest the cilantro before it starts to bolt. So see how the leaves start to get smaller, and then leaves are bigger. Now this is all good stuff you could use to make your pico de gallos or any of your Thai or Vietnamese dishes that use a lot of cilantro for things.
Cilantro lime chicken wings.
Yes, which you just made and we talked about on the podcast. Did we talk about it this week?
The one that comes out tomorrow.
The one that comes out tomorrow, we're going to be talking about that. Of course, I'm also harvesting lots of carrots and dill and all kinds of beautiful things like that. What I wanted to do today though, so I'm basically done with my harvesting for this morning. And that's one thing you got to keep in mind, is as the summer temperatures start hitting faster, you have to pay a lot of attention to the weather, and you want to get out as early as you possibly can when the temperatures are still cool and grab that lettuce and spinach and things like that as quickly as you can. Something else that's really important to know about harvesting your spinach this time of year as things go to bolt, and when I say when things go to bolt, I'm talking about things going to flower. That's cilantro that then grows into coriander, and once it starts putting its flowers on, it's coriander, and it creates a coriander seed. That's bolting, that's what I mean. spinach and lettuce start to bolt. When spinach starts to bolt, the leaves get small, you quit creating those big beautiful leaves that you want to use for cooking. So you want to try to harvest that stuff really young as often as you can during this bolting season. Lettuce actually turns bad. It gets bitter and it's gross. So once lettuce has started to bolt, once you see a flower on lettuce, leave it alone, just ignore it, let it grow, let it flower. The flowers are going to be good for the flowering season for all the beneficial insects. The seeds are going to harden and dry on the flower, on the plant in the summertime or as it starts to warm up. And at that point, you can begin collecting some of those seeds off of it for either rebroadcasting. I tend to do a just giant rebroadcast of things kind of everywhere, especially in what I would call my border rows. You see that big tilled area over there where I put my wildflowers in a couple of weeks ago. That's kind of places where I would put old seeds or seeds I've saved, or I would also just go ahead and save them, make nice mixes that I can then use again in the fall. That's kind of some early planting, some kind of lazy planting that I do. And so those are some of the things that you learn in a class. Like yesterday's class, we had a great turnout yesterday. I have another one coming up on April the 23rd. Those are just very basic, general month gardening workshops. They cost $44 a carload. You can fill your car up with 7 people. You can come out. I do those once a month, so the next one's on April the 23rd. But then I also have a farm and forage coming up on April the 2nd with Cassie Vanetchik, who's a friend of mine who's going to teach us some of the things she's learning about foraging and how to use those things on our land and in our gardens for our own health and wellness. So all of that being said, let's take a walk through this garden, the back garden that you know, and look at the flowers and start to see how we start to see those beneficials starting to come out. We start to see the beetles coming out too. We start to see the caterpillars coming out. Things that we're trying to create a balance of more beneficials faster than the pests, right? If you see lots of ladybugs, that's a good thing. They're eating up all of those aphids, thank you. They're eating up all those aphids as we're beginning to create the flowering systems that help to collect the aphids on them, the sunflowers, the nasturtiums, things like that. They're going to be shifting that direction. And then when we get done with looking at the flowers, we're going to make our way back around to the first season of a new garden and some things we've done back there so I can give you some updates. So one of the things I want you to notice as we walk through here is things like bachelor buttons. Bachelor button, this is a bachelor button, a big, bushy, nice plant. It will be eventually covered in little blooms like this. These blooms are all edible. You see there's one here and there's one back there behind you. So before too long, those are going to start popping open. You can also see lots and lots of white flowers. If you flip back that direction, the white flowers that you see, and you'll see some more of those a little while down, that is sweet alyssum. They call it, that's actually not sweet alyssum. That's actually calendula. That's sweet alyssum. And sweet alyssum, I wish you could actually smell it because it smells sweet. It's very nice. You can also see as we move along, the broccoli, you're going to want to keep an eye on your broccoli, even if it's small. If it starts to separate, then it's going to get close to bolting. So you're going to want to harvest that stuff. But the good thing about broccoli compared to cauliflower is that broccoli will create florets. So even after you've cut the main head off of your broccoli, even if it's small, you're going to get a bunch more little florets that you can then cook with. Cauliflower, however, you need to go ahead and cut that out as it starts to divide up. Cut off all those green leaves. You can use those for cooking as well. And then that plant's pretty much done for the season. So you can see some of the things happening here. Here's a calendula plant. All the flowers of the calendula are actually medicinal. So I cut these flowers, I throw them into pretty salads. We use them to decorate the carrot cake cupcakes that we made for the long lunch club that we just did. The next long lunch club is coming up on April the 20th. It has already sold out half of its seats. There's only a few more. If you want some, send me a DM today.
Earlier we looked at that little white flower. Tammy's asking, what's the name of that flower again?
It's the sweet alyssum. You also would see it in purple, and it seeds really easily. So the best way to get good sweet alyssum is to put a lot of seeds down in the fall and then to keep reseeding it through the winter. And then it's just gonna crazily pop and grow as long as it can into the heat. And then once the heat sets, it'll start to put those seeds on again, grab all those seeds out, throw them back down, collect them up for yourself to use for next season. It's amazing. It's a very, very good companion flower but it also just smells really, really good. So I want to go back to the calendula real quick before we're done, because some things I learned about calendula. One, calendula is really good at helping your body and your gut bacteria deal with candida. Candida is yeast, which you can find in your stomach. You can find it, of course, women deal with it. Of course, babies deal with it on their tongues, all kinds of things like that. A calendula plant is very good and helpful for that, but the leaves are also edible. So that's a really good mixture of a nice, crunchy, sweet leaf. It's got a little bit of a bitter front end, but the back end is very sweet. And that leaf is really good also for mixing in with your salad mixes, a really good salad mix. Now, I've also been popping in, of course, marigolds. You're going to start to see different types of flowers coming on, poppy flowers and things like that. Here's some more coriander or cilantro. That is a very, very good cover crop, good for early flowering for beneficials, good for some allelopathic. Allelopathic means the hormones that plants share in the soil, but also share in the air, just like we do, that help each other fight battles and collect the types of nutrients they need to be the most successful. You're also seeing some of the snapdragons starting to pop. Some of these snapdragons have been here for quite a long time, like this one back here that froze, but is now about to just go insane with flowers. Those are good ways to make sure you grab it before it starts to get too bitter. So we're looking for those things like that. You see that lettuce back there behind you is a nice, beautiful, colorful mix. Go through and just clean that all up and pull all that stuff out so it doesn't get too bitter. You can see here lots of pretty carrots. I just go in on my carrots. If I've got an idea it's about to be ready, I can feel the top of it and it's still pretty small. But that's how I make decisions about whether I'm quite ready for it to harvest as well. Here's some tatsoi. This is like a bok choy, not very bitter, a little bit like a mustard green, but not a super bitter mustard green. It's actually a very tasty bok choy, tatsoi. Okay, coming back this way some more. Here's some more of these romaine heads. Bib lettuce heads. I'm going to take these out because this is the size of stuff that's going to start to try to bolt and get bitter. So I don't want, and interestingly enough, if you cut it off like this, oftentimes it'll just start regrowing. And even if it only regrows for flowers and seeds, that's just as beneficial as the harvest that you take from it. So don't just pull your plants out, cut them off. This is one that is really ready to harvest. I hate that it has all that dirt on it. I'm gonna leave it for now. Okay, look at these pretty, flip back that way. Do you see those pretty turnips there? There's another one kind of a little bit further ahead of it up here to the next to the thing right there. Really nice, pretty, I think it's like Hiroshima Japanese turnips. Those are my favorite turnips. This is a row that I worked on cleaning up and showing off. This is all sunflowers along here. Lots of good sunflowers that I seeded last year as I was getting this garden into permaculture production. Now you can see how it's doing a very good job of maintaining on its own. You can see lots of cilantro bolting. You can see the calendula that are all starting to flower. I still have pansies. You can also see the little purple flowers of like wildflower things that I've left. As often as you can, leave those until you have to move them. You have to get rid of them. Over in this section, I did plant a lot of sweet Alyssum. You can tell in the sections where the Alyssum really got strong and big. You can see it here and here, and then here on this row, it's just covering this row. And it smells so good over here. You can smell dill and cilantro and sweet Alyssum, all things that the beneficial insects are looking for. They're looking for that smell so that they know where to go to, which is why the bees always follow me around, because I always smell like some sort of essential flower oil. Here's henbit, which I've just kind of let keep growing here until I have to do something about it, because it's a very nice early wildflower. And until I need to get it out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and let it be. Now these are poppies. And I'm about to have a lot of poppies growing everywhere because I have poppy seeds planted everywhere. There's actually one that got out of control down on the bottom down there. These are the beds I harvested most of this stuff off. So you see me with a bucket of stuff here, right? A bucket, a few carrots. Everything outside of just a couple of the cilantros came from this row, these 2 rows right here. Something you as a small gardener could do in your backyard very, very easily. Let's look at this broccoli. Do you see how this broccoli is starting to get like that, and it's kind of where it's like not super tight anymore? It's starting to broaden itself out again. I'm trying to decide whether I'm harvesting this today or tomorrow, but that's how close it is right here, and that's what I'm looking for. Once I harvest that top one out, all this around the bottom, come over here, well, come this way, right here, this one. This one is one that the main head got cut off of, and you can see all the little florets that are starting to come up inside there. Keep an eye out on those florets because they go to flower really fast this time of year, and if you want to collect them for food, you gotta grab them up really quickly. So all along the edge over there, and then even throughout the fields, pastures, along any kind of section where we've got some dirt because we moved something, we've got different types of flowers that have been spread out down here. So you can see the verbena and that other little purple flower I was showing you earlier. Try to leave those as much as you can. Some of the things that become like somewhat obnoxious, this is that stinky catweed or whatever. Smell that.
Oh yeah.
That smells awful, right?
Why'd you ask me to do that?
Just so you could give everyone on camera the experience. These types of things, if it's like a weed that you know you don't want and like, it's a good time to come in and pop them because the ground is soft and they're big and they're easy to tell apart. So then you can just pop those out really easily. And go ahead and do that. That's one that I tend to pop out. We feed, of course, all of the green stuff that we pull out to the chickens. So that's one thing to do. That's a great way to not have to worry about waste or feel bad about waste. So leaving the flowers, you can kind of see where, even where we've weeded around things, we haven't done a quick mow. And even if we have to do a mow, we do a high mow. Well, over here is where I'm beginning to see butterflies and dragon shade. Keep those lettuces in the shade so they don't get too hot. So this is where I've begun to see butterflies, moths. I saw a hummingbird moth yesterday. It was so cool. It was like right next to me. I can understand exactly why they call it a hummingbird because it's like a hummingbird, but it's a moth. That's really cool. The bees, lots of bees. All of this is a daikon radish that now I'm going to take the daikon radish out. It started flowering. I'm going to do it one at a time. The daikon radishes can be turned into kimchi or other types of fermented good, which we talk a lot about fermented good foods and gut bacteria in Monday's podcast. There's a whole dinner table talk conversation about gut health and gut bacteria and things we do and things we plan to do more of.
There are noises.
There are noises. If you're talking about gut health, there's always going to be some noises involved. So you can see how each week my sugar snap peas are starting to get bigger and stronger and healthier.
You're going to get them up. How tall will they get up?
Oh, they're going to get all the way up to here, and they will be a mass of just like full-on blanketed peas. And
so
you know, one of the things you can do if it's feeling too crowded for you, my friend Jennifer just reminded me of this when I was up at her house a couple days ago, is you can just, if it's like, okay, it's going to be a little bit too crowded, and here's a good one on the outside that's going to be far from it anyways, I'm going to snap this off like that. Now you've got an early pea sprout that's really tasty. Oh my God, so tasty. Here, hold on. I want you to taste so you can affirm for me. Sweet like a pea.
Oh my God.
Oh, so good. Oh my God. That's the thing you can do to liven up your salad mixes, and while you're trying to thin, or if you're trying to thin, you just throw those over to your chickens, right? Because you have chickens and the chickens help you eat all that stuff.
You can have backyard chickens in Corpus Christi, up to 7 hens.
That's right. So you can see more peas and things happening here, the tomatoes, all this stuff. But look, do you see all these beneficials? Can you see the bees? They are very, very happy and crowded over here. They love borage. This borage is an edible flower. 2 bees right there. They love this, they love that, they love all the little yellow flowers. These are edible, the flowers are edible, you can use that. It's also a really good, their leaves are actually a really good green manure. Green manure meaning instead of using cow manure, it's a nutrient dense manure, green plant that you can put down in your rows. At the classes that I do out here, I talk a lot about soil health and how to manage your compost in your gardens. More flowers. Down here, my coreopsis is starting to pop. Now, I have gone in and tried to get rid of a lot of the coreopsis because it can be too much. This row back here actually has a lot of, when we had the spring flooding last year, which please, if you will, pray for me for spring rains because we absolutely need them. The farmers, the cotton farmers, the corn farmers, everybody needs spring rains. So help me do a little stomp, stomp, shake your rattle, do whatever you need to do, shake that booty to get some rain because we do need spring rains. They're very important. But because of what happened last year with spring rains and this being kind of a washout spot, and we've done everything we can, I've done everything I can to get growth happening here so that I can keep some flow, so much flow, because all it does is wash away my nutrients, my soil, my seeds, if I don't do something about it. So that's part of the reason why I've let this kind of overgrow and thrown all my wildflower seeds, extra wildflower seeds this direction to get this type of thing happening. Now I can still go in like I did up there at the front and clean out a patch and put in a tomato and then put some seeds of something underneath the tomato that will help cover the ground there while I still have all these nice sunflowers growing up most of that pathway. You can see where the snapdragons are starting to pop there. I also have different types of wild lilies, dandelions, the prickly weeds that have a yellow flower on them as well. Those, of course, all do come out, but if that's the only flower you have in your yard, please leave it. Also, the clover. Clover is really good, and I say this every single time I have the opportunity in the springtime. Clover is your weed and feed answer without having to pay for it. If you let the clover grow in your yard, its job is to feed nitrogen into the soil. It also, with the yellow flowers, attracts all those beneficial insects. And then when the summer sun starts to hit, it actually will kill it, okay? So, or you can just mow it down when you're obnoxious, when you feel like it's obnoxious. Like if it gets super tall like this, you would just go in and weed this out. Now all of this stuff is very beneficial. It's wild lettuce and different types of flowering, things that are all good. You just weed that down, that becomes green manure. Or you throw it over to your chickens. Yeah. That's exactly right. Dandelions, for if you've got lizards, if you've got any kind of animal that eats greens, they love dandelions. Rabbits, chickens, all of that. Give that to them. So there you go. You can see all the different types of flowering, how this garden is beginning to very quickly attract different types of beneficial insects, flying insects. I've got this Gallardia that I planted last year, a couple of different varieties of it, because I had such a good patch of it on this corner over here that seeded so well. I was able to just take those seeds, throw them out over there, throw them over here, throw them on the different rows. So this plant's going to be kind of coming up everywhere eventually and taking over. All right, so look here, this is what I'm talking about. These little yellow flowers right here. Really important stuff. And then look, you can see here is a wildflower. So putting things on your, if you see something like this is one you pull out. Not just because of the flower, because you saw that I had some over there. But what happens over here, if there's a lot of moisture in the soil, you start to get some powdery mildew. And you don't want that. So this is a good one to feed to your birds immediately if you can, when you see something looking like that. You'll see it on dill, and you'll see it on a lot of different squash vining plants, and you don't want that on your squash vining plants or your cucumbers or anything like that. as we're making our way through the pasture, take a peek at the primrose. Different types of flowers that are coming up. You can tell that I've done a very biodiverse seed scatter all across this property, because a lot of the different types of flowers and seeds that you're seeing now aren't necessarily native. Now they may be native, but often because of how much flooding and runoff we've had over the years, and no one's been actively planting stuff in those areas, then that's when we start to see that more of that growth, or none of it at all. When you come out here for a long lunch club, the pavilion is where the lunch is. We've got a nice little outhouse. We're also going to start working on a dinner club, a small dinner party. Of course, we're on the table, but we're linking it up with the podcast, Dinner Table Talks. So I'm excited for that to come together and see how we can get those of you involved in that or interested in that. So stay tuned. Check out the podcast if you haven't, so you can hear the details of when the first tickets go on sale for that one. Hi there, little man. These flowers that you've been kind of watching me kind of baby or whatever. So this would have been one that you watched me baby. That's a calendula. And then this snapdragon, I moved that around all year through the winter so that it wouldn't freeze. This is some new annuals and perennials. This is a verbena. This is a verbena, and these are petunias. Petunias are annuals. Verbena are actually perennial. And so they can maintain if you put them in the right space for it. Over here, I've got some red sage salvia that's starting to pop red there. That's nice. Now look here, this is like a native verbena. But a lot of this stuff is coming up because of the different types of broadcasting seeds that we've done all over the property and all over the land. Now you can see what's happening here. Each week as you join me on Sunday and we're showing off this brand new garden, this garden is about 3 weeks old from the very first date that we tilled it up and started building the beds. It's got potatoes, and come over here so you can see. Potato leaves coming up. This is a red potato bed. And then nasturtium, because the nasturtium's gonna die before the potatoes need to be pulled out. So if you're gonna companion plant potatoes, you have to keep in mind that whatever you plant there, you don't want to care that you're gonna have to pull it out when you have to dig up the potatoes. So one of the other things I did in here was I spread some lettuce seeds in here, because by the time my potatoes start to want to come out, lettuce will all be bolting. So I'm not concerned, but what I am concerned about is all of this space for the wind, which comes hard from this direction, to dry it out, and then also for different types of weeds to come up. So anything I can do to keep this bed covered with something like lettuce or something else that is actually somewhat productive for me is good. Now I've got the corn going in over here, and then you've seen me go in. Let's see if I can find one over here. La, 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 la. Right here, look right here. So after my corn started germinating and coming up, then I went back in and put in squash, some of it vining squash, here's one right here, some of it bushing squash on the end, and I also put in beans. So what happens here is I've got the three sisters going on. Yesterday I planted a watermelon on that end, a tromboncino on this end, and a couple of bushing squash right in the center, and then beans on both sides. So this is going to be a really nice Three Sisters mix over here. Over here, I did purple beans, bushing squash, but I also did zinnias. So lots of zinnias will pop up and down here. You see here's another squash of some kind. I believe this is actually a cantaloupe, so a melon that can kind of work over this area here. So I can go down and harvest a bucket full of purple potted beans. And then I've also got my squash that's going to keep vining. My bush squash that's on the ends or in the right and the center are going to make a nice big bush. But in the meantime, they're going to keep the soil covered, and they're going to keep the wind from blowing everything so harshly. And that's the kinds of things that are happening. Corn, potatoes are starting to come up here. I'm watering this garden almost every day. That's how I keep things germinating correctly. The corn germinates solidly like this across, look back over there where you can see a bed of corn, because I watered it every day after I planted it, so it got enough moisture to germinate across the board. Potatoes, corn starting to come up here. Now, as the corn starts to come up over here, I can go back in and plant beans, squash, melons, watermelons.
Right here's a good place to point out how heavy the mulch bed is in your footpath. But we're coming this way, so you're kind of, the photograph today is getting these filled in that
Getting
direction.
more mulch.
Yeah, more mulch.
And a lot of what that mud is there is actually runoff. So you have to keep in mind how much runoff is going to occur. And number one, you want to make sure your seeds stay covered. So you got to give them a good amount of depth so that they don't wash off. But then in addition to that, as you water more through the season, or as we have heavy rains or anything like that, it starts to uncover your potatoes. You don't want your potatoes to be uncovered. As they develop, you need them to stay in the dirt. If they get uncovered, they turn green and then they're no good to eat. So what we're doing here on the last bed row is we put in these trellises so that I can put in some tomatoes and some trellising things that are going to help create a wind block for here, for the chickens, for the porch, all the things going on like that. I'm only putting in my really big hardy tomatoes first, because over the next like 14 days, we're gonna have heavy winds, like anywhere from 19 to 25, and even probably some gusts higher than that. It's our windy season. So that's the reason why we want the rain, because the rain helps to keep the soil wet even through a windy season. But a windy season is going to beat up a plant. Someone said to me yesterday in the class that we did, I've heard that if you have a plant that is wind protected, the same time planted, the same age, the same amount of sunlight, all of that, and then another plant that is not wind protected, the one that is wind protected will grow faster and will grow bigger. And that is the absolute truth. The wind is going to keep things from growing productively. And so that's an important thing to do everything you can to give them the wind protection that they need. That's not as much of a big deal in the urban areas, but you still have to be aware. My friend Jennifer, who lives in an urban area in Kyle, she lives in a suburban area. She's in a new development with a lot of wind. So she's still managing the wind. So if you're in a new development of South Texas, kind of over in the south side area where there's lots of new developments, you're going to be dealing with the same type of wind. And so you still have to be protected. Now, if you're in the deeper, older parts of your city and you're very surrounded by all kinds of things, you're going to have less wind, you're going to have less freezes, but you're also going to have more pests, you're also going to have more mold. So there's different things you need to know about each piece of land that, as I've gotten to know this land better, now I've been farming again out here for a full year, almost 2 years, and now I've been living on the land since September again, and so I can see those things. So last but not least, I wanted to just, what am I pointing at? Oh, the yeah.
Well, we have the portable coop back over here to just get the chickens, A, some green grass, but B, have them work all of this soil that's budded up to your new beds.
Yeah, and they're putting fertilizer down. And, the important thing about that hot fertilizer is you don't necessarily want it up in your beds. And we actually took some of the hot fertilizer, because there's the longhorns walking horns back there, by the way. It's a great spring day, so everybody's happy.
Yeah, I got a wheelbarrow full of their plops.
Yeah, so their plops that happen kind of in this corner over here a lot, so it's easy for us to get to, went in the very deepest part here, completely covered by mulch. And these guys, the same thing. And then the compost pile that I'm making over here, this is an important part you have to understand about composting. You have to have some of that hot microbiology that often comes from fertilizer. It can start on its own without fertilizer, but oftentimes you either have to buy it or you have to wait a really long time before that kind of microbiology is created in a cold compost pile. So that's part of the reason why heat and moisture and all of that thing is really good for your compost pile, because it breaks it down faster and creates that microbiology that you're looking for. But if you've got animals that can help you with it, animals laying their manure alongside my gardens and in my pathways, not on my garden, but inside it or near it, helps to break down material compost in place in my garden. And then over here, these guys help me make a garden pile, a compost pile that has their manure in it. They eat all the seeds, all the bugs, all of that. They tear it up, they move it around, and eventually I'll have a nice pile of dirt back here that they've helped me create, which might not be so big for a big, huge farm, but it's going to be great for an urban area, and it's certainly going to be great for me to come over here and grab a bucket of good compost real quick to put in a pot or whatever it is I'm trying to just quickly do without having to go get the tractor, get the big movement happening to get the big fertilizers that I need to have. So, and then last but not least, before we close out on this amazing spring equinox day, is we've got a hoop house coming in. Now, you know that one over there, that's the nursery. That's the greenhouse. The greenhouse is warm. And one of the things I've said week after week, we're gonna change the top of the greenhouse to give more light in there for the winter time, because in the winter time is when the greenhouse is most effective in our area, in the cool season. But otherwise, something like this is the most beneficial in South Texas. It's a hoop house. It'll have a 50% shade cloth on it. And then what that does is it gives me the ability to keep all my young plants in here together, protected, somewhat protected. They're going to get sun, but not too much sun. They're going to get wind, but not too much wind. And then they're going to have the ability to get stronger, and then I can move them out into the gardens. It's a very good place to grow up some perennial plants, because if you go to the nurseries, you can buy a big perennial plant that costs you anywhere from $25 to $100, or a perennial meaning Turk's cap bushes and lantana and salvias and sages and rosemaries and all your trees. That's your perennial plants. If you buy a big perennial plant, there's a high expense to it. Now, you might want to buy a couple of those to go ahead and get your stuff started. But if you're trying to get a lot of perennials, then the best thing you can do in my case would be, I bought a 6-pack of sage or salvia. I bought all kinds of little inexpensive lantanas. Then what I can do is use my own fertilizer mix, my own topsoil mix, and plant it in a bigger pot. And if I've got a place like this, I can store it through the summer months, make sure it gets watered, make sure it's really healthy, maybe even store it through the winter if I need to, because right now is the best time of year to plant perennials. Through the end of April, make sure that you're planting them as quickly as you can, March and April, and keep them really, really nicely watered and healthy so that they can root down. Once they've root down, then they're stronger in the summertime. You may still have to hit them with some water in the summertime. Then they can make it down to the fall where the temperatures cool up. But by the time we make it to winter, if we have any really strong freezes, which I expect to continue happening over the next several years, is that you will have a strong enough plant that even if the top part of it dies out, or even if all the leaves freeze off, it'll start to bud back in the springtime, just like a lot of and we didn't walk through the orchard, but we've got apples budding and blooming. We've got pears budding, not blooming, but budding, meaning that you start to see the green of the end of the tree. That's budding, right? And then starting to see the wild Texas peach tree has a plethora of beautiful, actually flowers on it. We're also seeing our big trees bud. They're starting to show their little green tip ends. We haven't seen the grapevines bud yet, but we expect to see that within the next few days or week. And so these are all of the things that are happening on this beautiful spring equinox. So for your gardens, water, 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 plant seeds, leave the flowers, okay? Harvest your lettuce, harvest your spinach, do all of that stuff. For your personal self, go take yourself a nice, long, clean shower, and while you're showering, think about all of the troubles of yesterday that you're gonna wash away. And then take some time in a journal or something to plant seeds of intentions as we move forward into the new year after the equinox. And then be sure to spend some time basking in the glow of God's love and light that comes from our amazing sun. I love you all. I hope you have the best day ever. If you're looking to come out to the farm for a tour, just DM me. That's no big deal. I'll set my schedule to match your schedule the best way that I can. You can fill a car up with 7 people. It costs $44. I spend an hour of my time giving you on-farm information. I'm also doing edible consulting. I'm doing some workshops with different corporate organizations and different Montessori schools and things like that. So if you're looking for help from me, and you've heard that Aislinn can help, or you've heard me talk, and you've been nervous about sending me a message and asking me how you can help and what my prices are and how I work with things, send me a message. Let's talk it out, because I want to help you. That's why God put me on this earth, is to help others and inspire others to grow wellness in their body and on their land. I love you all. Have a great day. Goodbye.